Ray, people will come, Ray. They'll come to Iowa for reasons they can't even fathom. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it. They'll arrive at your door as innocent as children, longing for the past. They'll walk out to the bleachers and sit in shirt sleeves on a perfect afternoon. They'll find they have reserved seats somewhere along one of the baselines, where they sat when they were children and cheered their heroes. And they'll watch the game, and it'll be as if they dipped themselves in magic waters. The memories will be so thick, they'll have to brush them away from their faces. The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball. America has rolled by like an army of steamrollers. It's been erased like a blackboard, rebuilt and erased again. But baseball has marked the time. For better or worse, as James Earl Jones proclaimed, baseball has marked the time. It has stood as common ground, a way to connect and converse when it was fun and bonding, or when it was too hard, too painful to talk about what lurked just under the surface. But as author W.P. Kinsella proclaimed, baseball has also acted as a conduit to the strange and spiritual due to its unusual rules and dimensions. And for one cast member of Field of Dreams, this confluence of extraordinary events outside and inside the ball field was at times overwhelming, but ultimately transformative. Tonight, we'll talk a little more about the experience of filming this magical story in the cornfields of Iowa. We'll unpack the amazingly staged and coordinated final scene, and we'll follow the journey of Dwier Brown, who suffered the loss of his father just before filming began, and who discovered an emotional surrogate in the most unlikely of places.
This book really should have never been written. The film should have never been made.
I sort of have this feeling that one of the reasons I was born, was to be part of this, to get this out into the culture.
What they didn't count on was the word of mouth, that people would see it and then just say, oh my God, you have to go see this movie. It ended up defying the odds.
Midnight Library of Baseball presents Season 2, The Making of Field of Dreams. I'm Ben Orlando. Did you know Field of Dreams was a comedy? According to writer-director Phil Alden Robinson.
I think the film is basically a comedy.
Really?
I do. Until the last scene, people say it's a tearjerker. The last scene is a tearjerker, but until then, it's sort of a comedy whodunit. It's a little bit of a mystery, and it's got a light touch.
And according to Dwier Brown, it was intended to be much funnier.
I think Phil would have said Field of Dreams was a comedy. I mean, he worked in comedy mostly. And when I look back at the original script that we got when we shot the movie and the final product, what's been cut is a lot of jokes, literally just setups and punchlines that were extricated from after we shot them from the final movie. And I think the movie sort of had a life of its own. I was surprised when I was writing about the movie that it was in fantasy section of, it's considered a fantasy movie. I just thought it was interesting that, it would have been in the fantasy section of most video stores back in the day.
This movie, however you want to classify it, was mostly filmed in 4 locations: Boston for the Fenway Park scene, Dyersville for the farm scenes, Dubuque for the nearby town scenes, and Galena, Illinois, which was used as a stand-in for Chisholm, Minnesota. Specifically, Galena was a great fit because the main part of town was a trip back in time. buildings that haven't been touched for 50 years. And it worked well for the scene of Ray Kinsella traveling back to speak with Doc Graham. For cast and crew, Galena and the Doc Graham scenes were some of the most memorable. From casting director Marjorie Simkin.
I was there for that night shoot, and that was a spectacular, crazy evening, because we had this beautiful little downtown area, with the old movie theater and everything. And we took over this town at night, and we did this night shoot. And the sound guy was playing very loud Brazilian music the whole night, trying to keep everybody going. I'm sure nothing in that town ever sounded like that in the middle of the night, before or since.
For writer-director Phil Alden Robinson, it was a combination of the atmosphere of Galena and the sheer presence of Burt Lancaster as Doc Graham.
There was a moment in his office when he's talking about stretching a double into a triple and flopping face first into third. He had trouble with the scene. He had trouble remembering. There's a lot of lines, and we had to do it a bunch. And he was getting frustrated with himself. And we finally got a take that he nailed, and I still remember what side of the camera. I remember where I was standing and the view I had of him, because in that moment when he was doing the shot, I remember feeling like I'm not seeing lights and stands and the camera next to me and the microphone boom. I'm seeing a movie star on a screen. It was like a hallucination in a way. He had such powerful charisma and star quality that I really felt like I was watching this on a big screen in a movie theater, and everything else just evaporated around me. And I've never felt that in any other moment.
Sound engineer Russell Williams also recalled an unforgettable moment with Burt Lancaster.
There were so many things that I didn't expect to feel working on the project. One of them, just being in the same space with Burt Lancaster. For some reason, the day that we shot the scene where he would have transitioned from being the young baseball player, Archie Graham, to now Doc Graham, and he crosses the base path, and then he's coming over to attend to Kevin's daughter. And I'm standing, but I'm behind my sound card. He's passing in front of me to go over to where the bleachers are. And Ben, I have tears in my eyes. Now, this has never happened to me on a set, because this is way before I had the benefit of James Horner's just wonderful score to go along with that scene and everything else that, he gives life to. But it was that moment again where I was reminded, I said, man, this is a guy I remember working with, seeing on the big screen, working with him. And then he still had that jaw, he still had those teeth, he still had that. I mean, just to watch him work, to watch James Earl do that speech in front of the baseball players and turn around and tell Ray, people will come. It was one of those moments where I really emotionally felt, okay, maybe this whole sacrifice was worth it.
For production manager Brian Frankish, James Earl Jones was also a sight to behold.
Every morning as the production manager, everybody shows up for the call on the call sheet, so on and so forth. And I look around every department. Anybody got questions? You got all the stuff you want? You all right? You're all set? They look good to you? You turn over to the assistant director and says, I'll see you at the end of the day. And I'm out of there because I'm building sets for tomorrow and next week and next month. But on this day, I couldn't leave, because this is the day that James Earl Jones said that speech. And I just couldn't leave. What a magical day to spend the day just hearing. James Earl Jones became a very good friend. I miss him very much. What an actor. Bless you, Brian, he would say to me. Magnificent guy. But God, to hear that speech come together.
In the previous episode, I talked about director Phil Alden Robinson's emotional roller coaster and his daily internal struggles, while simultaneously, cast and crew were having the time of their lives, witnessing magic and making magic of their own. And while Robinson was questioning his abilities, everyone else was in awe of what he was doing. From Brian Frankish.
I mean, after we sat the dailies, you get your film back from the lab, you see your stuff. And I remember I walked out of that screening from that day with Phil Robinson. We were in a warehouse, set up a screening room in a warehouse. And I said, Phil, this stuff is magnificent. This is just wonderful. And he said, yeah, Brian, it's so close. I'm not sure I could get what I'm dreaming. And I just said to him, you're doing a pretty damn good job, guy.
Speaking of magic, and just having celebrated Halloween, something happened in the town of Galena during the time travel scenes with Doc Graham that caused cast and crew to take a long, breathless pause. Documentarian Van Ling remembered the story.
They shot in Dyersville and a place like that, but they shot in Galena the scenes that are supposed to be Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the old street.
Yeah, the old street, and there was a cemetery that was near where they were shooting, and they weren't shooting in it in the cemetery at all, but they went over and visited, and there was this monument. Somebody said they would, like, when they broke for lunch, people would just sit out with their sandwiches, and they were, it's grass in the cemetery, so they would sit down there, and somebody looked up, and there was a big memorial that had a bunch of names on it, and one of them was John Kinsella, which of course was the name of the father in this. And they, while they were shooting Field of Dreams, they're like, this has got to be a sign. This is crazy, hair standing up on end kind of thing.
If you ever take fiction writing classes, one of the pieces of advice you're bound to hear is to create a deep and rich backstory for each of your characters, even if you end up including only 3% of that backstory on the page. This is true for all films, but it's still interesting to mention, from a production standpoint, the depth of the backstory in every shot of Field of Dreams, with many details you won't notice on a first or second or even third viewing. From Van Ling.
All these little things that you have to do to create what's on the screen, and you have to think through everything, like decorating the house, how they took out all the interior walls, put in new things, made it feel kind of like a 60s loft, and put in, a Warhol picture on the wall here, and a picture of like Martin Luther King or something over here. And so you use all of those pieces of skills from all the different departments to create who these people are.
Yeah.
Who these characters are. And that's always fascinating to me. It's not just, it takes place in a house and on a baseball field, let's just go out there and do this. Everything, if you're doing it well, everything's crafted. The choice of costumes to make them look like they are just what somebody picked up, threw on in the morning, but at the same time, it shows who they are.
Yeah.
The fact that he drives a minibus, a VW minibus, right? And all of these little things help sell who these people are.
If you think this show's worth $1, please donate at the website midnightlibraryofbaseball.com or through Podbean. You can also leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast. Okay, back to the show. One of the incredibly detailed and time-consuming backstories that really stood out to me was the backstory of the father, John Kinsella. When Dwier Brown arrived on the set of Shoeless Joe, he was asked to sit for a series of photo shoots. The photos would be used to accompany Ray's monologue at the start of the film. From Dwier Brown.
I mean, I had originally been hired, as I recall, for 3 days. It was basically fly in, shoot this scene in a day and leave. But because a little bit because they were behind schedule, but mostly because Phil had decided to shoot that final scene at magic hour, and there just wouldn't have been enough time to shoot it all, which, makes sense. I ended up there for 3 weeks, and I think they wanted to sort of plot out how they were going to tell John's story, particularly in the opening monologue.
The photos were meant to create a backstory, but also to highlight John Kinsella's decline after the death of his wife. Hours and hours went into the preparation of each shoot. Some were shot in front of a green screen, others in front of the cornfield or by a stream near the farmhouse. Hours of costume changes, hours of hairstyle changes, makeup changes to turn John Kinsella from a 20-year-old to a 30, 40, and 50-year-old. According to Dwier Brown, from all the hours of sitting and all the photos taken, only 6 were used. But more than the time, these photo shoots had a deep impact on Brown. From his book, If You Build It, a book about father's fate and field of dreams, Dwier Brown wrote, quote, "When the final photo was taken, I walked across the backyard toward the makeup trailer. I was tired. I felt as if, mirroring the pictures I had just taken, I'd lived an entire life in a day. Growing up in a farm, getting married, having a son, working, getting old. In particular, the photos I had taken with the boy playing young Ray made me wonder if I would ever have children of my own." End quote. This surreal, compressed life experience must have been even more surreal considering what Dwier Brown was going through emotionally at the time.
It was really a time warp, having just left my dad's funeral too. So I was in a very in flux state of being, playing a ghost, in a place that felt so familiar. And my father was so recently dead that I hadn't wrapped my head around that. And I was troubled by the fact that I wasn't sad about it, even though my dad died at 67 and, I had wanted so much more time with him. Because my dad had had such a rough life and because I had kind of probed him about that before and understood the difficulty at his dad, how difficult his dad had been to him, I just felt like my dad was free and that he was somehow happy, and that's why I couldn't be sad about it. And I imagined him there in Iowa at the set with all these ghost players. And of course, these ghost players are just local Iowans who played semi-pro ball, who were dressed in old-fashioned uniforms. But it felt real, and here's my dad, a ghost, kind of buzzing around like a hummingbird through the shooting of the movie. And it was a very kind of magical place even then, for me in that fragile state. My father having died so recently.
Because Dwier Brown had spent his first few days sitting for these photos, he'd been isolated from most of the cast and crew. So as he started to integrate and people learned who he was and the role he was playing, they paused. They took a second and third look. Again from Brown's book, quote, "I could feel wheels turning and heads nodding thoughtfully as each person adjusted their vision to fit me in. I suspected that everyone who'd read the script had subconsciously cast their own father in the role of John Kinsella, and they were now working to imbue me with their father's personality traits in order to keep their own vision of the movie intact." End quote. And not only were people putting their own fathers and histories onto Dwier Brown, but because of the recent death of his father and what he was experiencing, He was cracked wide open, vulnerable and exposed, and transmitting this deep emotional loss throughout the space surrounding him. It's not unheard of for a small role in a film to carry so much weight, but it's not the norm. And that's exactly what was happening here. Do you know how much time Dwier Brown spent on the screen playing John Kinsella? 6 minutes. But when the cast and crew learned that he was playing the role of the father, he became their father, this 29-year-old man. But during the shooting of Field of Dreams, someone would take on the role of Dwier Brown's surrogate father, and on the surface, this man was not a likely choice. He was not an actor. He was not a member of the crew. He was, in fact, the owner of the farm, Don Lansing, a man in his 40s with calloused hands, a short barbershop haircut, a Minnesota accent, and a knowing grin. According to Brown, Don Lansing would suddenly appear in front of you, wherever you were on the farm. So surprising and mysterious were these appearances that cast and crew joked that Lansing had a series of underground tunnels crisscrossing the land. Since Dwier Brown's father was a farmer, and he'd just died, it's possible that Don Lansing's occupation and down-to-earth demeanor inadvertently cast him into this role, which Brown wouldn't realize until the last day of shooting. He was standing on the ball field, getting ready for his big final scene with Kevin Costner, and he was nervous, unsure of his abilities, and asking for help from the ghost of his father. And suddenly Don Lansing appeared in front of him. From Brown's book, quote, "Pretty as a picture, ain't it?" The voice was loud and nasally. I jumped a bit. It was Don Lansing again. Where had he come from? "Yeah, it sure is," I said. I could feel the crew was almost ready to shoot. I needed to be alone right now. "Don," I said, I grew up here, you know," he interrupted. "That house is the only place I ever lived." "Yeah, you mentioned that. You're a lucky man." "You betcha I am," he said. We both stood there looking at the crew working in the distance, like two farmers watching their corn grow. Only I was in a pinstriped baseball uniform, trying to prepare for an important scene. The silence lingered. "Don," I said, "I really have to—" "You know," he said, "this film crew has been awful nice to me and my mom and my sisters, giving us stuff, Shoeless Joe t-shirts and ball caps and whatnot, and I got to feeling kind of bad that I don't got nothing to give back to 'em and all. I'm sure they don't care about, so I made this here for you," he interrupted, "to say thanks." From his back pocket, Don fished out a gold-colored baseball cap with the DeKalb winged corn logo on the front. I recalled farmers wearing these promotional caps from my farm days in Ohio. He held it out to me proudly. "I wrote my name on it for you," he told me. I took the cap from his rough hands. Across the bill of the hat in ballpoint pen were the words Don Lansing Farm, scrawled in large, loopy cursive, made all the more shaky by the pen having to stumble across the rows and rows of stitching. I wanted it to be nicer, but Don looked like an embarrassed third grader bringing home a school project. "Thank you, Don," I told him. "I love it." I leaned in and hugged him, pinning the arm that he had outstretched for a handshake between us. I lingered in the awkward man hug in the setting sun, his right arm pinned between us while his left arm hung stiffly at his side. I could tell he was uncomfortable, but hugging his unyielding body right now was just what I needed. End quote. After this unexpected and initially unwanted moment with Don Lansing, Dwier Brown was ready for the biggest cinematic moment of his life. Everything was ready, because production manager and executive producer Brian Frankish made damn sure, down to the smallest detail, that everything was set for the twilight catch between father and son, followed by the endless stream of cars. But how do you get thousands of people to come to the middle of nowhere to sit in their cars for hours for free? From Brian Frankish.
How do we get them there? I had done a film called King Kong. It was Jessica Lange's first movie with Jeff Bridges back in 1976. And we had this big end scene where supposed to be Flushing Meadows with a big constructed Kong wall, and the giant beast was in a cage, a huge mechanical replica that was supposed to be the real thing. And we tried to figure out how could you get a free audience out of this. So we took out a full-page ad in the LA Times and said, "Come see King Kong," with a little cutout down the bottom. It says, "Cut out this form and write for tickets, mail them to us." Well, we got them to come in, and all these people showed up for free tickets, and it worked like a charm. So I said, "Look, I had this experience on King Kong with a newspaper ad. Why don't we do it? Why don't we do this for Shoeless Joe? Come be in the last shot of Shoeless Joe." Described what it was, write for tickets. And they sent they cut out the little things, and they sent in the tickets. And we ended up with close to 6,000 people, 6,000 cars. And so we had this wonderful setup, and it all worked like a charm. There's a train running through the area. I had to arrange for the train to not go through the area where I needed cars to be. I had to arrange with the highway patrol and the police and the auto club, because it was hotter than hell, and all of I had cars just steaming, out there in the heat. In Dyersville, which is the town right there in the background, their ball field was not usable for them that night. So I arranged to use that ball field to gather all the people together. And we had a little barbecue in the afternoon, and we had games, and people all had a good time. And when it got to the end, when I was supposed to put together this tell them what to do and make it all happen, we had a radio station inside the actual house, and it was broadcasting. So they got on their radios to listen to what was going on. Kevin was in there being interviewed, saying hi to all those people. And when it was time to get them to go, I picked up the script and I said, "I want to tell you why you're here." And I read him James Earl Jones's magnificent speech. "People will come, Ray. They'll come for reasons they can't even fathom. They won't even know where they are, except that there are seats here for them in the bleachers, and they will find them." I read him that, and the whole speech, it's such a magnificent piece of writing. So well done. And those people heard that, and I said, "You are those people. Now run out there, get in your cars, and pay attention to my guards and my placement people. We're going to have a good time here." And they got up and cheered and ran for their cars. It was just one of those great moments of they're just really wonderful. God, I had a good time making that picture.
This massive production, this incredible planning, is all meant to set up something so simple, a catch back and forth between father and son. From Dwier Brown.
Just the beauty of the whole idea of having a catch, that the exchange of the ball is very similar to the exchange of emotional, I give to you when you throw the ball, and I get from you when I catch it.
And as one of our listeners, Bill, put it a few episodes earlier,
when Ray first threw the ball, after his father agreed to talk, when he first threw the baseball, that was him saying, "I'm so sorry." And then when John threw the ball back, that was him saying, "I forgive you." and now we can carry on. And so then they continue to have a catch, which is like, okay, we got the apology out of the way, the forgiveness out of the way. Now let's communicate.
But because of the magic hour, they only had a few minutes to coordinate this final touching scene. Just enough light to be able to see Dwier and Kevin playing catch, but dark enough for the helicopter and camera to pull back and capture the headlights of the cars in the distance. And to add a bit more pressure, Brown was not confident in his ability to catch a baseball with the glove they'd forced upon him. From his book, quote, "For those of you who have never put your hand into a vintage catcher's mitt from the 1950s, like the kind my sweaty hand was now in, you wouldn't know that it's a completely inflexible piece of cowhide, padded to the degree that it's like trying to catch a baseball with a giant submarine sandwich." End quote. To add even more pressure, the roar of the helicopter rotors drowned out any last-minute instructions. The scene began. Kevin and Dwier took their positions and tossed the ball. Then the helicopter, carrying Phil Alden Robinson and his camera, lifted high into the air and transitioned from the two men to the long string of cars. The first attempt went well, so they tried again, and they had just enough time for a third attempt. But on this third try, Phil Alden Robinson had an idea. For the first two shots, the headlights on the cars were static, which of course gave the appearance of vehicles that were not moving. So Robinson sent a message through the grapevine to have the cars switching their headlights on and off. This brilliant trick on the very last shot gave the impression that the cars were moving along the road toward the Field of Dreams. They'd done it. Filming was over. In episode 11, we'll take a look at one of the most unorthodox film scores ever recorded, and the man behind the insanity.
You hadn't written anything out, had you?
No, it was all in my head. It would have been a disaster if something had happened to me. There was a problem afterwards when the copyright department at the studio called me and asked me for the score. I mean, that went on for 3 weeks. That was unheard of. There was no score for this
Oh, I never
film.
heard this.
Oh, gosh. I must have gotten 36 calls, and my agent got calls. They thought that I was playing a game, and I somehow didn't want to turn in music to them. But there was no printed music at all.
So literally the first 2/3 of the movie was not, I wouldn't say improvised, but it was written and performed at the same time in the studio.
Absolutely.
Had anybody else done that to that point that you know of?
Not that I know of. I don't think most people dare do that.
Next time on Midnight Library of Baseball presents The Making of Field of Dreams. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielyan. Good night.